Our conversation is going to be on the housing sector. Now, we know that everybody desires to own a home. Whether you build it or whether you buy it, it really doesn't matter as long as as long as you can call it yours. And we know that there's a current deficit of about 17 million and slightly over. And so that's what we're going to be looking at today. We're going to be looking at the issues, how these issues can and should be addressed. What role does everybody have to play, especially the private sector? And I'm being joined on the program by a Professor of Estate Management from the University of Lagos, Professor Timothy Nubi, and Dipo Davis is a publisher, Council Magazine. Good morning, gentlemen, and thank you so much for joining us this morning. Well, let's start with looking at the housing sector in general. At least this is the end of the year. Let's just take a look at how it's been like for most of this year.
Well, one interesting thing we are actually writing about this year, is the fact that building material prices seem to have either stabilized or in some cases have actually come down. Okay. Cement, which is a major component of building in these parts of the world, has actually come down significantly, about 6 to 7%. And of course, this has had a follow-through effect on cement blocks and concrete and so on and so forth.
So that means we've actually seen a drop in how much houses go for as well?
Marginal drop, yes.
Marginal. When you say marginal drop, could you equate it in a percentage level for us? Okay.
If you look at the building, it's basically made of a carcass. That is, you have your cement blocks, you have your structural bits. That is your decking, your foundation, and so on and so forth. Now that is where you actually see the savings, because cement has gone down. Okay. Certain things like sharp sand, fillings, and gravel, we also found out that some of those things have actually gone down. Okay. And as unlike the case where reinforcement and stuff, you would see a marginal increase, what we found out is that the prices have basically stabilized. Okay. So the carcass of the house, which is what carries the house, and which is about, what's say 55%? Of the cost of building a house, has gone down, we could say, between 6 to 7%.
Okay, that's not so much, but then it's a start.
Absolutely,
it's a start. Professor Nubi, looking at the sector, you're also part of the system. So would you also, apart from what he's mentioned, like the building materials have gone down and the rest of it, and so it seems as if we had a good year in terms of housing. Do you share the same view?
Well, from my own training, I will not look at it from the basic component of construction.
That's the building materials.
The building materials. I will look at it as how much did a typical house go for, a 3-bedroom apartment last year, and how much is it going for today? As rent crashed, as cost of the building itself, has it drastically reduced? So if the answer is no, then the reduction in price of building materials could be a response to plus demand. So it could really be, because the one thing is certain: rate of construction dropped.
Okay.
All over the world, you don't come and speculate as we are speculating. All over the world, as the year is running to an end, the Bureau of Statistics should be able to tell us how many houses started this year, how many houses completed. But we don't have such. So all we just do is we drive around the streets of Lagos and Abuja, and find out that we saw people working last year, people who are no longer on site this year. So we just speculate, which is not the best. Okay. But I just want to, one of the good news that I see is the evolution of alternative building materials being driven by Nigerites, telling us that it's not strictly brick and mortar, that we can use other alternative materials, which they call dry construction. And we started seeing alternative roofing materials. I was very, very happy when I saw in a remote area like Bariga using roof members to roof their houses that were not traditional wood. So we are coming up to embrace alternative construction materials.
Okay.
So
well, when you say alternative construction materials, what are we referring to particularly?
Yeah, alternative construction material, because I mean, before, if you want to build, all you think about is let me buy block, let me buy cement
and sand.
But today we have alternative walls, prefabricated walls. We have roofs that are made now not strictly from wood, but from PVC, from steel, and some other thing.
Okay.
So it's faster, and if we could pursue this direction, because such material could be produced en masse,
Okay.
then we will, on the long run, enjoy it.
Dipo, we have a lot of real estate firms coming to you to publish that they have properties available in certain sites. Was it still as, how would you rate it? Was it still as high as you had last year?
The professor is absolutely right. Demand has dropped in terms of purchasing of property.
What about leasing and renting?
Leasing and renting continues to go up. As you know, more people are coming into Lagos. So the leasing market would always see a rise. What we found is that I would say in spite of the tenancy law, which insists on a year's rent, the economic situation has actually made that happen almost on its own. So in certain parts of Lagos, not in all parts of Lagos, but in certain parts of Lagos, you're getting rentals at 1 year.
Okay.
In certain parts of Lagos. And we expect that this might spread.
Well, it's even though you pay 1 year, sometimes that 1 year could translate to as much as 2 years. But that's another issue that we're going to be talking about. What really are the problems? You see, everybody wants to own a home. I want to own a home. And I know the average next Nigerian too wants to own a home. I don't always have to want to pay. I don't always want to pay rent. I want to go home and I'm like, this is my house. And every Nigerian wants to do that. So why can't we get that right?
Okay, well, the fact of the matter is that no country has gotten that right.
But at least they've even managed to solve the problem, if not totally, at least halfway. Right now we have about 17 million and counting of people who don't have houses to call their own. They have to pay. Sometimes, in fact, let's say 3/4 of that number live in slums. So
okay, well, the issue of 17 million is a figure that even the professor and I have discussed, and many housing experts are wondering, where do we get this 17 million from? Exactly, because when you say 17 million, it just doesn't seem to have any basis. It seems to be a figure from possibly the UN, where, as the professor was explaining, they don't count certain housing stock. So houses that don't have maybe a sockaway, septic tank, running water will not be counted as houses.
So we have more than 17 million, is that what you're saying?
Well, I don't think we have a deficit of 17 million. And besides, if you want a house, you can always go to your village and build one easily. So the question of housing is not as straightforward as saying 17 million. Basically, you want a house in a place where you can go to work, where you have employment opportunities, where you have social, you have recreational. It's an aspirational thing.
And then, of course, don't forget that housing is very important to an economy's development. If, for instance, I have a particular kind of skill I want to sell, I want to market, and I'm in the village, and there's nobody there who appreciates what I do, then I really will not make any progress, and I really will not make any meaningful impact, even on my immediate community, because nobody is buying my product. So I would want to come to somewhere where they're going to buy my product.
Absolutely. I'm not saying you should go to your village, actually. But the point I'm trying to make is that when we're talking about houses, we're talking about houses in certain places. So when we talk about deficit, we need to look at it vis-a-vis the fact that people want the houses in certain places. So the deficit would be, to explain it properly, would say there's a deficit in certain places. There's no deficit in the village. Is there? There isn't.
Well, if I